I'll make us start, but we won't actually start with the tasting yet, so you'll have to have a little bit of me talking to start with, which I know is not how I usually like to do things, but it's the logistics of it. I think that the Nicholas and the team have done a fantastic job. The amount of samples they've had to pour out is absolutely fantastic to see. However many, like hundreds and hundreds of samples poured out in half an hour with this bizarre sort of contraption that Nicholas has got is really quite impressive. And there he is. This discussion is about innovation to an extent. It's about trends in gin. Some of these are very, very new products. We've got one product that was only released a couple of weeks ago. Some of them have been out for a year or two. One we have today is an exclusive. I think it's the first time it's being tasted here, which is quite exciting. It's possibly the one where I'll make my general, like as I do every year, one error in pronunciation. I think this might be this one. So I think just to start off, and this will segue into the first one that we have, to talk a little bit about base spirits and things. And this is, although actually saying that because I think it's still going to be a bit of time, and I don't think I can talk for long enough before everyone gets their samples. I will briefly talk about one of the other trends I've seen in the last few months. So I was asked, I think it was in February, to come up with some trends for the gin industry. And I don't know if anyone's ever been asked to come up with trends for anything, but it's quite difficult. Here's the secret. Just talk about stuff that's just happened, but that no one's really realised yet. So one of the things I had noticed was it was when I was over in Spain in November for a bar show. And the thing that was very surprising was the amount of strawberry gin that was out there, and I know Charles knows it well. And the speed at which these strawberry gins seem to have been released was quite impressive. My understanding is a lot of it started from one particular gin brand, a strawberry gin, which was very heavily flavoured of strawberry and let's just say light on juniper, and a preference for serving it with tonic. Although the tonic wasn't actually tonic, it was lemon Fanta, so it was essentially strawberry and lemon Fanta, but it was called the strawberry gin and tonic. But this has become very popular, and all over the place I saw a variety of different strawberry gins, and I have some good friends that collect gin, and last time I went and checked their collection, they had about 20 different strawberry flavoured gins, and they range from the more genuine infused sort of genuine strawberry flavours, like what Anne occasionally makes at Jensen's, and then there's the Tiptree one, which is the made with the Jam Company and with Hayman's, which is their Little Scarlet gin, which I think is a very good one, and then others were these neon pink strawberry ones of varying quality. But it was just very interesting to see that there was this great craze, yet we've not really seen it here. But that was all of the rage in Spain. So how are we doing for samples? Who's got some? We're about, it's like 3 rows without samples now, I think.
Everybody's got them.
Everyone's got samples. Oh, you can't even see. Great. All right. Well, we can get started, and I can stop playing for time. So, as we know, and as many people have said, gin is booming, and as are the number of distilleries that are opening up, and no one wants to just do the same thing that everyone else is doing, so they need to differentiate, and so people are trying out new ideas. Now, Charles did a great talk on base spirit, and we've spoken a lot about bases and various regulations and things like that. And certainly, as you all know that the base can have an impact on the flavour and the texture, but potentially what base you can get is somewhat limited, and not just limited in terms of a regulation point of view, but also in the cost and the availability. Imagine you, and we have experimented with this, made a gin with tried to make a gin with an agave base. So you try and get some of the qualities of tequila, but then with the juniper and those other sort of flavours. Very expensive to do, not a very practical and cost-effective way of doing it. And we've experimented with some other variations, a cherry eau de vie Kirsch-based gin. Again, way too expensive to make it commercially viable. But there is a potential way of slightly getting around this, and this is what the first sample does, which is Jinzu here. Essentially, they add their interesting spirit distillate after the gin has been distilled. So it's distilled with NGS, and then they add some their spirit distillate afterwards. So it's 41.3. It's made at Cameron Bridge, which is where Tanqueray is made. And this was created by a bartender from Bristol, I think, called D. Davies. And it was, the competition was called Show Your Spirit. And it was about trying to invent a new spirit category, which I think, and many people have heard me make this joke before, is like trying to invent a new colour. Nevertheless, I think Dee did a great job of what she came up with. So it's a sort of, and do come and have a look at the bottle, because it's a fantastic bottle and it's very complicated, and it took 20 minutes for them to explain it to me, but I won't explain it all to you. But it's essentially inspired by her love of Japan, and it's a sort of Anglo-Japanese hybrid. So you've got juniper, coriander, and angelica as the main juniper notes, then yuzu, the citrus, and cherry blossom. And there are various, you can see the sort of the cherry blossom here on the bottle and things like that. But originally, it was designed to be made with distilled sake. But because they needed to distill it up to 96, they realised, well, actually, there's not a great difference between distilled sake and neutral grain spirit. So what they do is they distill sake up to, I think it's either the high 50s or low 60s, and they add it once they've done the gin distillation. So it's a distilled gin in that respect. So this is the Jinzu. Thoughts from people? Can you pick up the sake on that, or? And really, it's almost like they're using the sake as another botanical. I think that's kind of how I look at it. And as an aside, I think it's a really nice example of how you can have a very, very simple and restrained botanical mix, but each individual component you can taste. And I think this is a really good example of people that want to do something with some slightly different botanicals. This is a really good way of looking at it. They aren't the only people that use this adding distillate afterwards. There's a gin called Ginabel, which is from northern Spain, and they use some fruit distillate, including a Mirabelle plum, and that adds so much of this character comes through. You could do it with apple distillate or a whole variety of different things, but a lot of the character is still going to come through, but you still have that potentially slightly cleaner base to do your botanical work on. So that's the first one. And the second one we come to is this category of signature botanical gin. Has anyone heard of this before? No, because he's just made it up. No. It's a concept that's been around potentially for a few years, and me and a few other people that write a lot about gin have been trying to find a good name for it. But essentially, what it is it's a gin that still tastes like gin. You can still, the juniper's still there and everything, but a particular botanical is highlighted on the bottle, and that's quite important that it's highlighted on the bottle. So something like the Knocking Hills Elderflower Gin was one of the first. Oh, the Heather Gin was before the Elderflower one. That was one of the first ones that I saw, and so these were released quite a few years ago. So we've got two examples of these. And the reason why I think it's more of a trend, even though it started many years ago, is when we did our Gin of the Year competition, which we did last year before we do our distilling trade show, which is essentially just open for people that have just produced gin in the last year, because it's just kind of something to sort of celebrate all the new guys that have come out. We had to add another category because we had so many gins enter in this signature botanical arena. So one of the ones that we had was the Liverpool gin Valencian Orange. There's a rose one as well. We had the Roxanne Fire from Curio, and I know you're here somewhere. There you are. Hello. And we had a couple of others as well, but my mind escapes me at the moment. But yes, so it's this idea, and when we were looking at judging it, I thought, well, if it's not communicated to people, and they say it's really, really orangey, it's a bit unfair, because you think, well, it does say Valencian Orange on it. So let's have a taste of that one. And this is number 2. So this is. Here we go. So this is created by John O'Dowd, who's here as well somewhere, I think. It's very difficult to see anyone here. Oh, there he is at the back there. And this was, now I've got to remember this right because he told me earlier, this was created for your son's wedding because he was marrying a lady that was from Valencia. So it was kind of bringing the two families together, which I think is a great idea. It's a neutral grain spirit, juniper, coriander, angelica, and some other botanicals, but then also the Valencian orange peel. And I think at this point it's important to note that these flavors are added via distillation. It's not the same as like a sloe gin that's added via infusion. So, what are people's thoughts of this one? You get the orange coming through, certainly, but there's still some of the other characteristics there, right? Still noticeably a gin, I think. Okay, so now we move on to the McQueen gin. So this is the new one. This is the one that I don't think anyone's tried before. Has anyone tried McQueen? Oh, a couple. Oh, it would be you, wouldn't it? There we go. Some people on the inside track have tried it before. So you can tell me, how's the distillery pronounced? Because this was the one I wasn't sure on. Trossachs. Yeah, I thought that was what it was. Yes, so this is their Mocha gin or Mocha gin. I think I used to call it Mocha and everyone just laughed at me, so apparently it's Mocha. I drink espresso, so there we go. So this is designed to kind of recreate that sort of flavour. What I like about how they've approached this is they've not just said, oh, we're just going to get chocolate and coffee and that's going to give us the flavour. They use a variety of different botanicals to kind of come to that. So they've got Labrador tea, grapefruit, vanilla, chocolate and coffee, and some other botanicals. And then they also use a local juniper as well in what they're doing here. This is one of 4 gins that they're bringing out, and I think they're due to release, I think, at the beginning of next month. They also do a mint chocolate, a sweet citrus, and a smoky chili. And I have tried them, and they are pretty true to what they should taste like. Mint chocolate is very nice, very cold with soda. I think it's quite a nice drink actually. Their plan is to have a sort of a gin club so that these flavors will rotate, and the more popular ones will continue to be made, and the less ones will be archived, shall we say? And what are people's thoughts on this one? Could you, if I had just given it to you, would you have picked up that flavor, or is it all just too much on the suggestion? Sorry, it is. Yeah, it's all distilled. It's difficult to find out too much detail because they're still quite cagey. I think we're quite lucky that they let us have some actually, and this is also not what the final bottle will look like. The final bottle is far more ornate than what we've got here. It's neutral grain spirit. It's the base spirit. I mean, I think I get it's a real dry chocolate on the finish, I think is where I get the chocolate coming through on that one. So, these are just a couple of examples, and I think it's nice to see, okay, you hear, oh, mint chocolate gin, that sounds kind of crazy and bizarre, but I think, and even with the Mocha gin, I think you could be quite skeptical, but I think actually they've pulled it off well. And it just goes to show that you can start to think about other sort of flavors. What I do like, and it's obviously we've not got the whole range here, but what is consistent across the range, and I think what was really good is doing a flavor like this. It would be so easy just to run away with the chocolate and the coffee and you can't taste anything else. But I think that there's that dryness, the juniper and the angelica that you associate with gin, and I think that they've done that in a really good way. And that's kind of the reason why I was so keen to have it here, because it's really showing that you can have innovation without just running away and not having it taste like candy floss or whatever you want it to taste like. So then we move on. We're going back to bases. It's been bases today. It does seem to be the theme. And as I mentioned in my previous talk, I spoke a little bit about this concept of grain to glass, which is very big in the US. And I spoke about some of the issues that they had in Washington State. And there's a new piece of legislation that has just come out in California, which again is about giving certain distilleries that want to have visitor centres more freedom to actually entertain and let people taste products and that. When I was actually at St George's Distillery, which is the terroir we had earlier, they had they'd made this sort of Japanese style whiskey, which was very specifically designed to go with soda. And I thought, well, if it's specifically designed with that, I'd like to try it. But we weren't allowed to try it in the main bar in the distillery. I had to go out and up into their little private because it was counted as a mixed drink. Even though it was just a bit of soda, it was counted as a mixed drink, and they couldn't serve it there. Now, the law has changed a little bit in California, but only if you don't use NGS. So at the moment, the law is if you want to be considered what they're calling a craft distillery, which gives you these extra freedoms, you can only do it if you're grain to glass. I'm not quite sure why. The regulations seem to be particularly poorly written, maybe even worse than some of the other issues that we've talked about today, because I think there's a restriction of gallons of alcohol, but it doesn't say whether it's proof gallons or whether it's bottling strength or whether it's off the still strength, so it seems very, very fluid. Anyway, so there's this idea of making your own base spirit and the more flavours coming through. And that also kind of ties in with people looking at more historical styles of things. There's a lot of, as Anne was talking about and other people, lots of old recipe books and lots of inspiration for making future products from the past, even if it's not necessarily a carbon copy of it, at least for inspiration. So this is where we come to the 1616 gin. Anyone tried this before? I'm sure a couple of people have, but many people? No? Good, that's what I like to see. So this is 46%. It's made by the Cotswolds Distillery, and this was made to commemorate the 400th anniversary of Shakespeare's death, which is, of course, this year. It's a spirit base of 55% malt, 45% wheat. It's juniper, coriander, angelica, cassia, nutmeg, orange, caraway, and allspice. Very much more of those sort of those greater spices were a lot more popular there than things like grapefruit. Well, of course, you couldn't have grapefruit in 1616 because it hadn't been invented yet. Yes, grapefruit was invented. So, it's a cross between I think it's a sweet orange and a pomelo, something like that. But the forbidden fruit. So this is a little bit what you might think slightly in the Geneva side, but again, it's one of these products where the characteristics of the base had to be balanced with the botanicals, and then of course it's aged in ex-red wine casks. So that's quite exciting stuff, and I think that there is definitely some, as Charles was saying about the grape spirit, I think there's definitely some of these flavours of grape and with gin that they work really well. So much more of a sipping sort of product. Makes a fantastic Negroni, of course, as you'd imagine. Very good old-fashioned, anything with red vermouth, very, very nice indeed. So this is something slightly different to sort of end on. It's the future but the past at the same time.